Welcome back to another UNC Tar Heels football recruiting podcast here on TarHeelIllustrated.com. And if you're watching us on our rapidly growing YouTube channel, that is called Tar Heel Illustrated. I'm THI publisher Andrew Jones, and joining me is our director of football recruiting, Miss Deana King. And Deana, we haven't done a football recruiting podcast in a while because once signing day occurred, and by the way, we rolled out 17 on signing day, 18 on signing day. We did one for each kid. There hadn't been a ton of news. There's been more portal stuff that we've been paying attention to than actual recruiting stuff. But recruiting is kicking back into gear now. Kids visiting Carolina with its basketball game against Georgia Tech had some kids in, some didn't make the trip because of the weather situation. And we're recording this before the game Saturday, so we don't know yet everybody who is there. But more the focus of this podcast is that we finally got a chance to talk to Gene Chizik and Charlton Warren, part two. A lot of part two going on around Carolina, around the Keenan Football Center these days, and to get a better idea of what recruiting is going to look like with Chizik running the defense and Warren sort of running the defense, and how that fits in with the way that Mac does things. And so we're just going to kind of have an organic conversation here. We haven't discussed this too much, so people will know. A lot of this will be kind of raw and fresh and kind of picking each other's brain and going from there. But my initial take is that I think that recruiting, Warren is going to have a spot. He said, I'm just going to go where the players are. If I got to go to Alaska to find somebody, I'm going to go to Alaska to find somebody. But I got a sneaking suspicion he's going to spend a lot of time in Georgia, which is where he has spent a lot of time previously in his career and has had a lot of success. Gene Chizik, don't really know yet. I still think it's probably going to be a little bit like it was before, where he's not going to roam the hallways all over the state of North Carolina, but he'll be out and about a lot more than he was the first time around when he really didn't do a lot of recruiting. So from there, what were your initial takes on more Chizik, but also Warren?
Well, I love how Chizik used the term, we're going to recruit as a village. I think that fits in perfectly way Coach Brown and the staff had been recruiting. They're very family oriented, and it was interesting to see he wants like all the defensive players to have a relationship with all the defensive coaches, and I think that's really important. He said a lot of great things in his press conference, as well as Coach Warren. And yeah, I do believe that Coach Warren's footprint's going to be in Georgia and the Southeast by coaching, at UNC before, but he's been at Tennessee and Georgia and Florida. So he knows the Southeast region, and I just loved his comments the other day when he explained about basically his approach in being a recruiter. He tries to, I don't know if win over, but he wants the family, the inner circle to trust him whenever he recruits a kid. And he said he wasn't a used car salesman, and I believe it. He's got a great track record as a recruiter and as a developer in talent.
Recruiting has been the number one strength of this program since Mac returned. So, and Jay Bateman was a big part of that. People have been critical of Bateman. I think people have unleashed a little bit now since he has been let go. And I think it's a little unfair because you should be able to unleash when he's there as opposed to when he's let go, if it's justified, and not wait just till when he leaves. He deserves a ton of credit for recruiting. Kids loved him. He could relate to kids. They believed in him. Extremely likable guy who did a lot of really good things at North Carolina. It was just time for a change. I think we all agree on that. And one of the things that I had rolling through my mind as I'm listening to Gene and as I'm listening to Charlton as well is, okay, where do they get what Bateman gave them on the trail? Where do they get what Bateman gave them around the football center? And I think that was a very, very important element to what Jay Bateman did in his job was the likability factor, the easygoing factor, the nickname factor. And everybody's a nickname to a guy like Jay Bateman. And the fact that He could go into a kid's living room and easily sell himself. He can go into a high school and sell himself to coaches. I don't think they're going to lose that. I think Charlton Warren's going to go about it a little bit differently because he's got a little bit different personality, maybe a little bit more forceful, but he's also got a lot of clout. Let's remember, Jay Bateman's P5 experience was North Carolina. Charlton Warren, been there, done that. He's been around a lot of stuff. And of course, Gene Chizik is 50-fold what it was for Bateman. So I think actually this will help recruiting because you don't need to sit there and try to convince a kid that Gene Chizik knows what he's doing. You don't need to sit there and try to convince a kid that Charlton Warren's been around the block a few times. They got that. They got that with Warren. If you're going to say, okay, Bateman and DeWitt versus Chizik and Warren, I think the pluses are on Chizik and Warren. We all know that Gene Chizik can recruit when he's recruited in the past. He's been around mega talent most of his career. I mean, he was bringing kids into Iowa State long before, back at the time when Iowa State was arguably the worst Power 5 program outside of Duke in college football. And he immediately gave a juice injection there, got to Auburn, which had been struggling. Boom, they win a national title. He deserves credit for getting Cam Newton as a transfer to Auburn and also being the guy who saw, hey, this dude can play. And the Cam Newton story is a fascinating one, and I think it's a hell of a good story. I covered Cam his first 3 years with the Panthers, and a lot of he used to talk about Gene Chizik and the fact that Auburn gave him an opportunity. I'll never forget him saying one time, and I'm paraphrasing, I wouldn't be here right now if it wasn't for Gene Chizik and Auburn. That's a paraphrase, but that's pretty much what he said. So I love the fact that the two people they brought in can identify talent. And I like the fact that they're going to identify maybe a little bit different kind of talent. Jay Bateman was recruiting guys to fit his scheme. And I believe that there has been a departure from that scheme based on the fact that the hybrid position perhaps might not look the same under Chizik as it did under Bateman. So what are you going to do with all those hybrid guys? They're either going to become real outside linebackers, they're going to get a little bit bigger and put a hand on the ground. I think we'll see that addressed in recruiting. And one of the things that we did talk about, you and I, before doing this podcast, we talked about it actually yesterday, was that they may not continue to pursue some of the kids in the class of 23 that they had been pursuing because the scheme, style, and approach are changing.
I think, with getting those two offensive side, and there's not going to be any change. Defensively, you've said it. They may take a look at the previous offers that Coach Bateman was very involved in post and giving out offers, and see, like, okay, and Chizik said it perfectly. He said, "Fit. Are these kids that they offer going to fit Coach Chizik's scheme, and not just skill set wise, like he said, just athletically, academically, personality, everything. They're going to reevaluate everything basically on defense because I've reached out to several 2023 kids and some 2024 kids, and some of them have not heard quite as often from UNC because they may be playing that hybrid position, or it may be a kid that Coach Bateman did offer, a younger kid that maybe Coach Chizik and Coach Warren may need to take a closer look at and re-offer them later down the line. But right now, I think they're going to do some reevaluating and see. I mean, they're not going to take offers away from some of these 5 stars and 4 stars that they've offered, but they've got to. And the thing about Coach Warren being an Indiana and defensive coordinator, and his stints at Georgia and Florida and Tennessee, he's recruited. I mean, he's actually recruited some of these kids, and he said in the press conference that he, I guess when he was at Georgia, he probably knew Marcus Allen and Will
Hardy.
Hardy, Georgia kid. So he probably was already really he knew those guys before, and now full circle, he's going to get to coach those guys.
And also some of the players that are already on the roster. Another thing too, which I think is part of what we're talking about here about reevaluating some guys, is, and the best way to say this, I guess, is that in previously there were separate rooms on defense and they were kind of competitive at times. And the gist that I got from what from what Gene Chizik said is when he's talking about recruiting as a village, that he wants, a DB to get to know Tim Cross, wants to get him to know Tommy Thigpen, because the defense is going to work more as one. I can't remember the exact line that he said, but it's a saying that Gene has, which is, you're not an individual on defense, you're one of 11. And I think you're going to recruit more that way. I don't think that was always the vibe on the defensive side of the ball, especially the latter half of this past season. I'm not sure that all the different groups were fully connected. I think that's probably the best way to say that here in a public version of that. And I think that they're going for something a little bit different. And that will begin in the recruiting process. So you won't, when a kid shows up, he doesn't have to introduce himself to the defensive line coach. He already knows the defensive line coach. He may not play defensive line, but they all have to be in concert with one another. It is no secret that communication on the field was in chaos this past season. It's no secret that the defense looked highly disjointed from the get-go at Virginia Tech. When they said, well, we couldn't hear stuff because of the stadium, but they were totally disjointed from the get-go. Now, they recovered at times, and they had stretches where they played really well. But I think that element was always a part of the defense. And the other thing is that with the communication and leadership, when the defense started falling off the rails, it had a terrible time getting back on. I think part of that's because they weren't in sync. There wasn't a singular or two voices that had to be heard that the kids were trained to hear to kind of get them back on track. They were maybe lost in their own thoughts, and there was sort of an isolated mentality out there. So it was hard to get things back up. A classic example of this is that they allowed 32 drives of 75 or more yards this past season. 31 of them ended up in touchdowns. Like, they couldn't get off the field. And the one that didn't end up in a touchdown was South Carolina's last long drive of the game. Did not end up in a touchdown. So the first 31 drives of 75 or more yards were all touchdowns. So I think their approach to recruiting, Deana, it begins there and it carries over into the Keenan Football Center, and then it carries over onto the field, whether it's at home or on the road. I think that's part of what they're trying to create here.
And, Coach Chizik, he used words that we had talked about before. I mean, he used communication. He used simplified, making things more simpler to the kids. And one of the things I really liked was basically you recruited kids that had natural ability. And sometimes you just need to turn them loose and let them play football. I mean, some of these kids were really highly ranked and they got outstanding ability. Just let them play football. And, if it's so much going through their mind, he said we want 4 or 5 guys to play like 4 or 5 guys and not 4-7 or 4-8, because
exactly.
Split seconds, if a kid has to think a split second, maybe the wide receivers done went by the DB and he's got to play catch up and everything. So I think it's going to be a lot of change. And, by telling on the message boards, a lot of people were disappointed in the game at South Carolina, against South Carolina, and the season ending 6-7. But by the message boards and on social media, I think a lot of the North Carolina fans have a little bit of optimism for the spring game coming up and possibly for the season, because there's a lot of, I told you the other day, there's going to be a lot of storylines covering this team this year, because I mean you're going to have a new quarterback, you're going to have some new faces showing up there in Chapel Hill. Basically, I think they're going to like say, okay, guys, no penciled in starters. You're going to have to earn your being a starter and everything. So I think a lot of North Carolina fans feel a little bit better after hearing Coach Chizik and hearing Coach Warren and their ideas and thoughts on the upcoming season.
I got some flack for something I said in late September, and I doubled down on it in early October. I tripled down on it in mid-October. I quadrupled down on it in late October, and so on, where I said the value of what Mac is learning this season might reflect that there's a couple of steps backwards on the field. The appearance they're going backwards on the field. But the value would be they take more steps forward the following year. And I didn't want to come right out and say it at the time. I wanted to let things play out. But I was talking about the approach defensively, and that, in year one, man, they did everything so much better. The juice ejection, the communication, the way the defense was run with the guys that were back. And it was far more simplified. They hadn't given those kids anywhere near as much as they had given this past year's group. And they went 7-6. They still weren't a great team, but they managed to go 7-6. They were competitive with Clemson. They did enough to really kind of ignite the program in the right direction. Then in 2020, we had the COVID year, kind of a weird schedule. They still lost 4 games. So it wasn't like they were one of the great teams in Carolina history. They did go to the Orange Bowl. And it was a very good year. It was certainly progress on the field. This year, there was a step back on the field, really on both sides of the ball in many respects, but certainly defensively. And I think this was the first year where Mac really got a chance to see, okay, what is this defense all about? What's this scheme all about? What is this cascade of communication all about? And he saw pre-snap issues throughout the year. And I think he learned and realized as the year went on, even though Bateman got one last chance for the South Carolina game, because no decision was made before that Mac realized, okay, I don't think this is going to work at this level. We need to simplify and do something a little bit different. And that's why Gene Chizik made sense. That's why that was the first call that he made. It was the first call he made, because we all remember what Gene Chizik did the first time, and he inherited a very similar situation. Larry brought the 4-2-5 from Southern Miss. It worked in Conference USA, which is, I guess, where they were at the time. The leagues have switched up so much since. And it worked there because you just outscoring people. But it wasn't working in Chapel Hill. Wasn't working in the ACC with that 4-2-5. They had too many small guys. I remember they had 210-pound guys they had on the ground as a rush-in. When Norkeith Otis was like, 210, 212 pounds, and he's got a hand on the ground as a rush-in, and he's sort of a hybrid guy. And then I think I give Matt credit for when he came back. He said, okay, if this guy is doing this at Army, imagine what he could do with the ACC guys. Well, it didn't work out. And I think Mac recognized that during the course of the year. So you simplify by bringing in a guy who's a master at simplification. He's a master at getting a 4-star to play like a 4-star, getting a 5 to play like a 5, which is what you alluded to a few minutes ago. And that ultimately is what it was about. And that's what it will be about moving forward. And why this matters on the recruiting trail, kids defensive prospects that sit in Kenan Stadium and watch a game next year or watch them on TV, it's going to be a lot easier for them to identify what they might be doing when they're in Chapel Hill. It'll be a lot easier for them to say, okay, I'm that guy. I'm going to watch what Des Evans does. I'm going to watch what Tony Grimes does. I'm going to watch what Cedric Gray does. And it's going to be easier for them to envision themselves playing there. They've already kicked their ear on the recruiting trail. I think now they have a chance, as the product on the field improves, as the understanding of what your experience at Chapel Hill will be like, because you know all the coaches and you know what your role will be if based on whatever position you are. I think that they can go up a notch even more with that. They might even do better on the recruiting trail now than they did before. And that's saying something, because Jay Bateman did a damn good job in recruiting. And I think that they have a chance to even do better.
Well, with the 2023 class, they've got one commit, and that's Tad Hudson, a quarterback. So, the pitch and everything's gonna change as well. Even with the 6 and 7.
Yeah.
Last year, or for the class of 2022. They had that pitch of, we're building, there was a lot of hype and hoopla, and the class, everyone of them stuck with Carolina and signed 17 of them, 16, and then they got Hardy right before the early signing day.
Yeah.
So I think it's going to be, I'll be honest with a lot of fans. I think it's going to be a lot of wait and see for the class of 2023 regarding UNC. They're in great shape with a lot of kids. I've spoken to several. A lot of the in-state and the regional kids. They're in great shape, but now the kids are kind of like, okay, let's see, because they're going to have a new scheme, new defensive scheme, especially on defense. Now I'm more or less talking about defensive recruits, to see, that, and then, offensively, your offensive targets are going to probably look and see, who wins the quarterback battle, spring game, how things are going. So I would caution Carolina fans just not to panic if there's not a lot of commits already basically in North Carolina's bag, because kids are looking, they're coming out a little bit later with their top list, so they're being very cautious. So a little bit different situation than last year when Matt could say, oh, hey, we're coming off an Orange Bowl, so little different recruiting pitch this year. He's been out on the road this week. I've seen tweets. He's been in the western part of North Carolina. Just yesterday, I saw him at Maiden High School. I'm sure he's checking out Chris Culver, who's a dynamic kid, wide receiver, DB, athlete type kid from Maiden High School. And then he was in South Point High School with the Sullivan Absher, a big offensive tackle that they offered. So that's two of the places I know. I'm sure he went to several more, and then had to get back into Chapel Hill because preparing for this big recruiting weekend for UNC. Just hope I guess the storm is probably coming, but don't know how bad it's going to be. But kids, I had Marquis Anderson. He had planned to come up. He was from Dorman High in South Carolina. He's pushed his visit back till I think the 29th when the Tar Heels play NC State in the Smith Center. And the Jaden Wayne that was coming from Tacoma, Washington, he kind of postponed his plans because of the weather. That's January weather in North Carolina. It can be 60, 70 degrees one minute and then 20. So,
and let me reiterate too that we're recording this Saturday afternoon. So the reason is I've got to head to Miami Monday morning. We'll actually go. The game's Tuesday. I'm taking my wife, so we want to get this done. Sunday's going to be just a loaded day with content. We have a night game Saturday, so we wanted to go ahead and get this in. Plus, what we're telling you isn't going to change in the next 48, 72 hours. And I think that the value is that we finally had a chance to talk to Gene, and to Charlton, and we have a much better idea of things. I also think, going back to what you were saying that about the class of 23, we were saying before any change was made that, we've thought this is going to be a bigger class, so it's going to take longer to fill up, and so they're going to hand out a few more offers, and they're not even close to handing out the offers that they think they're going to. And I think so a lot of that will happen in the next 6 weeks now that they have Chizik and Warren in place. But also kids, the sales pitch is different. It's not just what Mac could sell to them, but it's what other coaches are going to, that guy's it's going to be 71 and they went 6-7 and they lost to Georgia Tech and Florida. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that you could say to put doubt into kids' minds about Carolina football right now. I think getting Chizik and Warren helps. I think that stops some of the bleeding. If they had not made any changes, I think it would be an enormous challenge. Kids would have to wait and see the product on the field next year, a lot of them, before committing. And a lot of the ones that might commit, the ones that might have been more interested in committing were ones that you probably maybe want to wait a while to hold them off before they committed. I think they have a chance of getting more of the class in play before they start the season against Florida A&M on August 27th because of the Chizik and Warren factor. Mac could say, look at what they did last time. And we got a lot more talent now. And they were coming down from 39 points a game and 500 yards of offense a game. Now they're coming down from that. Their starting point is much better now than where it was when Chizik came in the first time. And they have more talent on hand. And I think the infrastructure of the program's in better shape. And Larry did a really good job with a lot of stuff, especially when he didn't know there was going to be a bowl ban when he was hired. And he had to deal with a lot of that cloud that Roy used to talk about a lot. Larry never made any excuses. To his credit, didn't make excuses, landed some pretty good classes, and they won some football games. But the program is in so much better shape now in every conceivable manner that I think they're going to get kids, but they're not going to get maybe as many as they would have had this been another Orange Bowl type year, obviously. So I think bringing in Chizik and Warren helps. I think it helps the message. I think the simplification factor, the fact that, every kid that they recruit knows who Cam Newton is. Every kids respect the bling. The wedding ring is not really bling, but, championship rings. And Gene has one with Mac, and he got one of his own as a head coach. He's been on TV. Kids have seen him on the SEC network. They recruit a bunch of kids in Georgia. They watch the SEC network. There's Gene Chizik, 5 nights a week. So I think that they can hit the ground running on the trail more now than had they brought in somebody else who didn't have the name recognition, didn't have the prior relationship at North Carolina or with Mac. I think that they scooted forward several lengths by getting these moves than where they would have been, A, had they kept the staff intact, or B, gone elsewhere and gotten somebody that people have to get accustomed to and get to know.
The day that all the news broke about the hirings and everything, I went back, and just a cool fact, Gene Chizik and Charlton Warren were the lead recruiters for Tamon Fox.
Yeah.
And I was like putting that in perspective. I'm like, man, Tamon's been here a long time, but who was the recruiters? And, Coach, I can't remember. I think it was Warren. I think it was Warren that said, but he was naming off the kids that were there that are in the NFL. MJ Stewart, he was one of his guys. Cole Holcomb. Jeffrey Schottmer played a little, and
for the Saints for a year.
I think it may have these hires with Chizik and Warden may have kind of rejuvenized. I mean, I know Coach Ryan Switzer was posted on social media. He loved it, welcome back, and I just found it odd that Mitch Trubisky reached out to Coach Chizik. He was the first one, and everybody
knows
what
Chizik says. I think that there's something. I think that's Gene Chizik and Mac Brown are very calculated people. You say Mitch Trubisky's the first guy that reached out. I'm not saying it's not true. I'm just saying that if that's a calculated statement, it's a brilliant one because, again, the importance of crossing over, the importance of the whole of the program is part of that message there. And let's also remember that they were on staff when it was identified that Cole Holcomb could play linebacker. And I'll never forget that period, that spring in 2016, when our message board's like, how in the hell is Cole Holcomb going to, this guy wasn't even offered a scholarship. He's a safety. He's a big safety. He's not a linebacker. And people dogged Cole for 3 years. And I remember when Mike Eckler came in, I'll never forget when Mike Eckler was linebackers coach, he said, He said, I've coached 7 guys in college that made it to the NFL at linebacker. He said, I know what an NFL linebacker looks like. And Cole Holcomb is an NFL linebacker. People are like, what does that guy know? Well, who's the one who identified Cole Holcomb and stuck him in the middle of the defense to replace Schottmer right out of the gate? And for 3 years, he led the team in tackles. That was Gene Chizik. And Charlton Warden was a part of that defense. They can identify talent, and they don't have to have 5 stars, because it doesn't matter. Once you get there, it doesn't matter what your star rankings are. But imagine the selling point. Hey, we're the ones who identify Cole Holcomb, and look at him in the NFL now. He's playing very well with I've almost called them Redskins because I grew up there, with the Washington team, with the Redskins. And there were other guys too in that program. That program had a great culture in a lot of ways for a couple of years. And they had a lot of dudes from those teams that played in the NFL. You mentioned MJ Stewart. MJ Stewart he loved Charlton Warren. He used to talk about him all the time. And that was when Strobridge came in. That was when Crawford came in. Tamon was there. Remember 2016, Tamon started a game for Gene Chizik. And they're probably they're passing each other as Gene comes in with a box and Tamon's walking out with a box here in the last week. So I think that's pretty cool. I think this is somewhat a plug and play situation, but there is some mending that they're going to have to do on that side of the ball, and kids will see it. And the current kids will speak about Chizik and will speak about Warren to recruits in a manner that will help lure kids in. I think in the end, this is going to be a positive on the field, and this is definitely going to be a positive in recruiting. And it's not like they have to leap a lot higher in recruiting. They're already in such a great place, but they can even be better. There's a couple of kids that they didn't land, and maybe they land some of those guys. I know that there's one big-time defender in the class of 23 that you've been in regular contact with. I think how that recruitment goes with him is going to tell us a lot about what these guys do before they start playing games. Once they start playing games, I think it'll be different. If the defense is getting shredded like it did before, I think that'll obviously hurt. If they're locking down and they make the similar kind of leap that they made in 2015, then some of these kids who are maybe on the fence with North Carolina that are top 100, top 250 kids, I think they're going to get a few of those dudes that maybe they wouldn't have otherwise gotten.
Well, just remember, in their first stint, won 11 ball games, coastal champs, played for the ACC championship, onside kick, away from maybe doing some great things that year, maybe getting in the CFP.
Yeah.
So what Mac is trying to get to, Coach Chizik and Coach Warren says, hey, we were there. We were this close to getting there. So it's not like they bring somebody in and just they haven't done that. I mean, Coach Chizik and Coach Warren, they've got UNC and that defense. And we've said if Carolina possibly had a top 50, top 60 defense, they probably would have won 2 or 3 more games this past year.
They would have they wouldn't have been destroyed in the first half at Pitt. So whatever they did in the second half to recover would have been enough. They would have won. I think that they would have won the ACC championship if they had an average defense. If they had the number 55 defense in the country, I think they would have won the ACC championship. And that's with all the other flaws. That's with the sacks. That's with the red zone touchdown issues. That's with Sam having to run for his life and having to rely too much on Sam running this year. That's with the penalty issues and everything else. I think that they would have won the ACC championship probably if they had an average defense. The defense was abysmal at times. And as I said earlier, when it went off the rails, it didn't recover on its own. And usually that stuff happened in the second half, or it was kind of split, but it was a second half when it happened in some games that was just devastating, or it was so bad early on they couldn't recover. To me, the signature games were Georgia Tech and Florida State. After Georgia Tech is when you ask the question, what on earth is going on? When Jeremiah Kimmel said they didn't even prepare for Jeff Sims, which made no earthly sense whatsoever. And as I've said before, I think there was a bit of panic going on that side of the ball. And, when you panic, sometimes you don't think that clearly. And they fixed that problem, at least in theory, by making the change. And as far as recruiting goes, which is what our focus here is on this podcast, I do think that there will be pluses. And I'm looking forward to once they start talking to kids and you start talking to the kids that Gene and Charlton talk to, it's going to be really interesting to see what they say and to hear what they have to say and how different it is. And I think there's a little more gravitas in the program and all that kind of stuff, which I know when you have a 70-year-old head coach, you think, why do they need gravitas? Well, they did, because, Bateman was a 3-year P5 guy. Gene Chizik's been in P5 or on national TV for the last 2 decades. Charlton Warren's been in the SEC, ACC, and Big Ten for the last decade. So I think it's a big difference. And it's something that I think will pay off of this program in the long run and in the short term, really, as well.
Well, at the end of the day, I think Mac hit a home run, and right now, and I guess we'll have to see the end product when they start playing. And I really do think that it did rejuvenize the fan base after being disappointed in this season, and they're looking forward to it. Sometimes the best thing is some change, and so it's going to be on the defensive side of the ball for 2022.
Well, and they're getting at it in 6 weeks. Spring practice starts in 6 weeks. They have an earlier spring practice, which I think is good. They're going to hit a lot more this spring. Mac said that we got to be tougher, got to be more physical. I think one of the reasons they moved it up a little bit was because they got to hit. They're going to hit more, but also the season starts earlier. The opener is August 27th, which I believe is Mac's birthday, if I'm not mistaken. So they'll probably start practice around July 30th, July 31st. So it's probably made sense to move things up because of that, but also by moving up a couple of weeks and you hit more, that gives guys a couple more weeks to recover as well and be ready to go. And you don't want to get anybody injured, but they've got to hit. And I think with Gene Chizik there and the importance of physicality and dudes being dudes more than just this overly schemed stuff, I think we'll see that. So I can't wait I can wait for spring practice because we got a lot of basketball to come between now and then. But when spring practice does come, it's going to be a lot of fun and very interesting to see how they use these guys. And we'll also have 6 weeks worth of intel from the recruiting trail as well. So I know one of the things you like to do and you do so well is you're able to take the recruiting stuff and look at the team at the same time and kind of intermingle that, because the kids see what we see, but sometimes they see more because of what they're allowed to get into to see. So it's going to be very interesting once the kids are at practices in the spring and what they're able to tell us about practice. And some of the ones that maybe went to a Bateman practice and at a Chizik practice, some of the differences that they say. So we will get a lot of intel on the team in general just by talking to the recruits as well.
Well, January's a big month. It's starting this weekend, so I'll be in contact with several of the kids. Some of the kids have told me that they're going to be in a little bit later, and some very highly talented kids. I know the Ahmad Moten, defensive tackle that UNC is real in the class of 2022. He's currently at Tennessee for official, but he's supposed to come to UNC around the middle of the week. So we included him in the visitor because he will be on campus and everything. So it's they're not completely done with 2022. I mean, they do have some targets, and they did have a transfer portal offensive lineman, Spencer Rowland,
the kid from Harvard. Yeah, and then let me reiterate one more time. We're recording this on Saturday afternoon, and we're going to run it on Monday. So nothing is going to change, really. You'll have some intel from the kids visiting, but this podcast is more about the bigger picture, not so much this past weekend. So, hey,
we're talking like we usually do on the phone. So we're giving our subscribers some extra, give them some extra goodies and stuff.
I don't think I've cussed yet, so that's a plus. Because if I did, you'd hear my daughter in the other room go, language. So, and Micaiah in there, you should say something. Well, you never cuss. I don't. The rare times when you cuss, it's in a text message, and I'm like, wow, Miss King, she's hot tonight, man. She's cussing. She's angry about something. That's an emphatic flag in the soil kind of statement from Miss King when there's a cuss word that comes out of it doesn't come off your tongue, it rolls off your fingertips.
Well, I've had so many people. I think I have a fan club of people just liking to hear me talk on these podcasts, and when we're on the Zooms with the Carolina coaches. I mean, sometimes I look at the coach's reaction. You know, I think Coach Chizik kind of chuckled a little bit when he heard my accent.
Like, what the hell is this?
Probably thought I was one of them Auburn people, in doing things with the network. I've posted on or did some videos for kids. I remember sending the Auburn rival site something, and the Auburn subscribers were on there just really going after me, calling me a Bama fan. And I'm like, why? I mean, I'm not even nowhere close to Auburn or Alabama. I'm from North Carolina. So I enjoy it. I've gotten some tougher skin and everything, so I'm okay. It's part of my persona, I reckon.
Yeah, I reckon. If you're going to do this for a living, you have to have thick skin. So, and I applaud you for developing that thick skin over the last few years, especially since we've been doing this. And so my favorite thing about it is I can actually troll you a little bit with the accent and mock you a little bit, and you don't get upset. So that's cool. And I think a lot of people think it's kind of fun when I do my Deana impersonations every once in a while. And you guys do and just so people know, you guys do AJ impersonations. Usually it's in the group text where you guys rant and rave, like thinking like I rant and rave about stuff every once in a while. Kevin likes to joke about how, I interviewed George Washington and stuff like that. So I get my share of era. I get my eras. I think they'll come more from an angry bag than yours do. Yours are more endearing and loving. I think mine are more, they incise a little bit more. I think that's the intent, especially from Kevin. Right?
Well, I mean, it won't. I mean, the recruiting game never stops. So might have had a little pause with the new hires, but they're getting ready to go full force again. And I'll reiterate, I think Charlton Warren will be in the Southeast, especially in the Georgia.
Yeah.
And he'll have somewhere in North Carolina because they always give a region to a coach in North Carolina. But Chizik, he didn't do much recruiting last time. I don't know how much he'll do this time, but the main thing is he's been hired to fix this defense. I mean, he's got a lot of talent around him. He's got a lot of very good recruiters on the staff, so he might not have to do a lot of recruiting.
Well, you can recruit on campus a lot too. I mean, I like the idea of kids get to meet, position coaches and coaches from their area, in charge of their area. And there's a great thing going. And then they go to Chapel Hill and, oh, here's Gene Chizik. And a few minutes later, oh, here's Mac Brown. It's like, boom, boom. Whoa, that's pretty good stuff. So that's the way I envision a lot of this kind of playing out as well. So although Mac loves to get out, man. I mean, he tells you, he means it when he says it. He loves to get out. He loves high school coaches. Remember how Roy loved high school coaches? Roy loved to go out. Just get out in general. But Roy loved high school coaches. He was one time, and he used to say, "Look, man, there's so many great coaches all over the place that nobody knows who they are. They're not millionaires. They're not in halls of fame or anything like that." Mac feels the same way. Mac loves that stuff. He loves to get out there and do that. So whether Chizik does a whole lot of it or not, that remains to be seen. But I think that this is a great move on the field, and I think this is a really good move as far as recruiting. They're already doing an amazing job on the trail, and I think they could do an even better job as well. She is Deana King. I'm Andrew Jones. We kind of let you guys in a little bit with some of our on-phone stuff, minus the cuss words and all that kind of junk. So next time what we'll do is I'll probably have a conversation with Deana. I'll record it. I won't let her know, and then I'll pop it up on YouTube or something like that. So that'll be really fun stuff, right, Deana?
Yeah, that would probably be a big hit, So,
and if anyone who's lasted this long on here, just remember, for $8.33 a month, you can be a member of Tar Heel Illustrated. You have access to literally everything we produce, and I'd say 80% of what Deana does is on the boards, and you can't access it on the front page. You can't access it if you're subscribed to other sites in the network. You have to be a THI subscriber to get so many of her goodies and so many of David's goodies on the basketball recruiting front as well. So come on over. It's just $8.33 a month for 1 year, and you can be an expert and an insider as well. So Deana, thanks. Appreciate it. Hope everything goes well this weekend. Of course, that's past tense because it'll be Monday when everybody sees this, and I'll be in the air going down to. By the way, it's supposed to be a high of 69 on Monday, and I'm just like really bitter about that. I told my wife, I said, "You finally get to go to Miami," and they consider 69 winter in Miami. So when I was there last year, it was like 74, and when I was checking in the hotel, the girl at the desk is like, "I can't believe how cold it is outside." I'm like, "It's like 31 in Raleigh right now." So. It is what it is. But
and like my luck, how many times did you go to Florida last year?
5 for games plus my end of season trip, 6 times.
So I was on my way last January to the VTO All-American Challenge in Bradenton, Florida. And I'm thinking, oh man, first time in Florida, basically since 1978. When we went to Disney World with my family, we went to Disney World. And I get down there and it's like 49, 50 degrees. And I am like, that AJ, he has bragged all, about how hot it was and warm it was. He sent a group chat, him walking down with the palm trees. And here I'm in Bradenton and I'm freezing my butt off at a football combine. So,
but I have told you how Tallahassee's cold.
69, 70 degree weather in Miami while we're probably possibly digging out of a snowstorm. We don't know yet, but
you do know that I missed Bryce Johnson's 39-23 at Florida State because my flight was canceled because of an ice storm in Tallahassee. So I couldn't make the game. And I'll never forget trying to explain to people that, yes, it actually gets cold in Tallahassee, not like the rest of Florida. It gets cold there a lot in the wintertime, especially at night. When I was down there for basketball last year, it was really cold at nighttime. It was like 38, 39 or something like that. So, but Miami's a different story. It's never been cold in Miami. I love going down there because I like the shorts and t-shirt stuff, and that's what shorts and t-shirt stuff is. So looking forward to it. Anyway,
I just had to laugh at that because
this is the extended version of AJ and Deana chatting. Yeah. So anyway, we appreciate everybody
guys,
stopping by.
Just come to THI and you YouTube subscribers, try us. I mean, $8.33 a month, or you can do it.
Hey, everything else has gone up. Inflation's going like crazy. Our subscription prices haven't gone up. This is my 8th year running the site. We haven't raised prices. So it was a deal
I'm sure,
8 years ago, and it's a deal now.
You get a lot of information, like Andrew says. We don't put everything on the front page because we love our community. Me and we're really big on interaction between our subscribers. Our subscribers will ask questions and we'll try to answer them as soon as possible. We're very big on being on the boards. I mean, I spend a lot of my times on the boards. David's
private Zooms
same way on basketball.
And we just did a private Zoom for basketball there tonight. You can only get on that Zoom. You only have access to it.
And that was entertaining. I mean,
you only have access to it. You only have access to it if you're a subscriber, and we have to vet through everybody. So what we do is we make sure there's a process that a bunch of people aren't coming in. So it's straight subscriber stuff. And it's good stuff because everybody gets a story.
I know this is a football podcast, but
I don't think it's even that. What we're doing is it's a damn infomercial.
Well, I don't know it is, but if you want to see what a certain subscriber kind of looks like, you could see him on these Zooms. I mean, I know Danica is a big basketball guy, and if you sign up and for these Zooms, you get to see and talk to Danica.
I like listening to him. He knows the sport. He's got a lot of connections up there. He's played it. He's got family play. He got cousins and nephews playing.
Yeah,
You got nephews
he's a
playing
very
D1 right now.
knowledgeable
Yeah.
basketball guy. So
Anyway,
that was my little pitch to join THI. I mean,
there you go. Appreciate it. And if we do any more of this,
we do the things we do. We have our certain standards of the way we do things, and we'll stand by that. And we just hope you give us a try.
Yeah. And so this infomercial is over. We're not going to slash prices 15 times and give you 40 other, knife sets in order to go with this one knife set. It's just what it is, $833 a month. So come hang out. And I think this podcast ran about 15 minutes longer than we intended, than it probably should have, but what the hell? Oh, cuss word.
You did. You made
did she say anything?
almost
No,
the
I didn't
whole
hear.
thing.
I know. I didn't hear my daughter scream language. So we're good. All right. She's Deana. I'm AJ. If you stuck through all of this podcast, send us a note. Go on Twitter. Send us a Twitter DM. Let us know you listened to this entire podcast and maybe there's something in it for you. Thanks for stopping by.